here we are for the ReThink podcast. What church would this be?
Ephesus.
Ephesus. That's the place, but what number of the seven
It's also
is it?
windy.
It's very windy.
We're actually in the Church of Mary right now.
We're in the Church of Mary
Yes.
in Ephesus. And why would we be... Should we start with that or should we back
Nah,
off?
let's keep going.
We don't know the answer to why we're here.
We don't know where we're at.
Let us know in the comments.
Oh, Jesus instructs John to address this church, and we've been all over it today, up and down and around, and it is large, and there's a lot of hill.
We've done them three
We've
times.
done all these Roman roads, and up and down and around, and it's been pretty interesting. Favorite thing that you've seen here today?
Oh man, I think one of the coolest things just walking around is how preserved the original road is.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't help but walk past that theater.
Yeah.
Just to take your breath away. It's really cool.
The Ephesian Theater is that's world renowned. That's
25,000 seats, I think is what you said. You read
Yeah,
it, you read it on
25,000,
Google
yeah. It's been, that was this morning.
Yes.
So,
It is, and they're doing a lot of restoration work there. Tons of marble everywhere. Things are coated in marble. We went in a house, a 2-story house, and they had covered the walls with 1-inch marble.
Wow.
I mean, the whole, and we're not talking about a little house here. It was huge. 2,000 years ago, covered the walls with marble.
well, we
Pretty
went
intense.
to the priest of Dionysus. That was
That
the
was
same
it.
house.
Priest of
Yeah.
High Priest of Dionysus.
And it had its own basilica inside the house.
Right.
So basically he had his own place of worship.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, I think that's what you see all throughout the city is they're just temple after temple. There's 14 of them here.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Scattered along the road.
When we were in that house, the 2 stories, I was thinking Acts 19. Acts 19. Paul's here, planting churches, preaching. He's about to leave, and so he preaches all night. And Eutychus falls out of the 2nd-story window. And I doubt that he was in that house because the high priest of Dionysus wouldn't have been a common place for Paul to go and preach all night. But something like that, and he falls out of the house. It always gives me comfort to know that people fell asleep on Paul. I mean, not that anybody falls
I
asleep.
always heard that Eutychus too, if Paul would have preached all night.
Eutychus too if I preach all day. Right?
I have never heard that before.
What? Are you
That
serious?
is
Come on.
incredible.
That's how you remember his name, Eutychus.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
Eutychus too.
Use that in a sermon somewhere. That's good.
Hey, Andrew, what was your favorite spot you saw today?
The theater or the library was probably mine.
You know what's cool about that is that it is so preserved.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Well, it's because they set it back up.
yeah.
So
yeah.
it fell over in a earthquake, like 240, 260, somewhere in there, and then they put it back together. But they said there's no supporting structure or anything like that holding it up. It's amazing. Second largest, or the next largest library outside of the Library of Alexandria during the ancient times. So, I mean, it was just massive and awesome looking.
So while we're doing this, we're throwing up B-roll so people can see these locations that we're looking at. Mine was the latrine. Just kidding.
There's an inscription on it.
No B-roll on that.
Tell about the
this.
inscription
Yes.
on the latrine.
Well, it actually was at the side of the agora. And so, but you go from the library through the triple gate, customary Roman thing, and 2 slaves built it, so inscriptions are to them. That's all kind of a pretty significant dedication to be put there for 2 slaves, right? They were honored. But just to the corner of that, the inscription forbids urination because I guess people were using the corner. So if they catch you urinating there, it's death. So
That seems reasonable.
seems reasonable, right? Little extreme. I think maybe they're trying to make a point.
Yeah.
Well, the guards didn't like it when you did it either. So, I mean, it was.
But I survived.
What about you, Ben? What's your favorite part?
I really like the library. You know, it's funny. You go into these big buildings in our culture now, and there's the inscriptions of the people who have given money and all that. And there is the same thing in there.
Yep.
There's different former emperors who have given money. There's different people of high regard that have given money to help build these things.
Some of them
and
a lot of money.
Yeah, and their names are chiseled in the side of the wall. You know, it's just I was struck by how there's a lot of things that are different here, but there's still some things that are the same as in our culture. But the library itself, the front part of that building is just awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
Let's talk about some of the pressure points that the church faced in this community. And we've all mentioned parts of them, but obviously, I think temple worship was high up there.
So we spent a lot of time in front of Domitian's altar, the statue, and I think you did the video there, right, Ben?
Yeah.
What was the point of that story?
Well, so I think we need to start off first by saying the reason that John was writing the letter of Revelation from the island of Patmos is because Domitian was the one who had a hand in sending him there because John refused to worship him. So Domitian himself was the first Roman emperor that required the Ephesians to build statues or to build temples to him. And so the interesting thing is he builds this temple, and he's got some columns, and above the columns are him, and below that on the marble is these pictures of other gods. And so essentially what he's saying is, I am above all the other gods.
Yeah.
The gods were holding him up.
They're holding Domitian up.
Yes.
That's a pretty arrogant statement.
Yeah.
And he's got one hand in the air, one fist.
Yeah, power.
Power.
Yeah.
You could actually, that's so tall and it's high up on the hill. You could see that from the harbor in the ancient days. Now, we can't even see the water from the city. We see the marshland that has silted in, but we can't see the harbor. But he's making a dramatic point there.
Yep.
Like, I'm ruling over this place. All these other gods, all this other stuff, you got to answer to me. So that affects the Christians.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've kind of said, this is a large city, but it does feel like even as large as it is, it's still really condensed. Like everything just feels close. And one of the things that Domitian would require would be for everybody to offer an offering to him, and or any other Roman emperor or whatever they were doing at the time. But I'm just struck by how close everything was. And so it's just amazing because the Christians of that day wouldn't have really had anywhere to hide. You know, everything in the city is right here. And so, I don't know, it's just once you see it up close, you realize the magnitude of the situation that they were actually in.
So they actually were not allowed to participate in the agora, which is, there's a huge square here that's kind of walled around where all the market central was, right? Big outdoor mall kind of thing, and all the shops around. And they had to put incense in to offer to him.
Before they ever walked in, right?
To get in, right? And so refusal to do that, which would, a practicing Christian would have had to do, to refuse to do that, removes you from the entire participation in the market.
So you're talking social, economical, all of that at play for this group of believers.
And they held firm. You know, like in Revelation, the address to them is like, you haven't given in, you haven't compromised. And we've seen that in all the other churches that we've talked about, is the fact they have compromised. But in Revelation, they're talking about you're doing these things out of obligation. And they've lost that passion, that heart.
Love,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was thinking about this by timeline. When Paul came in 55, 56 probably, maybe a little earlier than that, to get this church established, that Acts 19 storyline is somewhere in there time-wise. Revelation is 90s, so we're talking two generations.
Yeah.
So I got to thinking about the significance of personal faith, not just practicing faith, because Grandma was a Christian, Grandpa was a Christian, Mom and Dad were Christians. I'm a Christian, and I'm performing the duties and obligations, or in this case, not participating as obligated. But why? My love relationship with Jesus is not theirs. I think that's an issue that that plays over to us too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I did an illustration one time of teaching with like 7 chairs, and how it's very easy for our children to take a chair down or 2 chairs down. It's hard to take a chair up when you're talking about intensity and passion and relationship and pursuit of Jesus. And maybe that's what's going on too.
One of the things you said in that illustration, I was pretty new to Christ Church at that point, but you said
That's like 9 years ago.
yeah, it was.
You remember that?
Yeah, you had chairs up there, but the key line I think that stuck out for me was, wherever you sit in this chair, understand your child sits a chair or 2 below you. And I know it's just what you said, but the way you said it in that message, man, it stuck out.
So that's probably what's going on here. Part of it, a part of it. Plus, just wouldn't that grind on you after a while?
Yeah. Yeah.
Being on the outside, that probably means you're poor. Your kids are going to be poor. You're not able to. All these festivals. What was it about with? Was it Domitian or no? It wasn't Domitian. Artemis.
Yeah. That's
Man,
crazy.
You're talking a temple that is as big as a football field.
Yeah.
100 and, if my memory is correct, 127 pillars, 60 foot tall, 6 inches thick, or 6 feet thick. 30 something of them were covered with gold. Like, talk about what kind of statement that is.
And the idol of Artemis. I've got a picture. I took a holding one just to remember.
In a gift shop.
In a gift shop.
No one buying it.
No one buying it. It was expensive. But I don't know how to say it without just saying it.
Just say it.
We'll show a picture of it.
Yeah.
We'll put a picture up of you
It
holding it.
is entirely, it's a woman. I look
It's a very sexually.
covered with breasts. Let's
Yeah.
just say it.
Yeah.
Well,
You
there's
know,
there's some scholars that say that they're male genitalia based upon the sacrifice there.
Okay, so the story is that her servants, the servants in the temple, were eunuchs. So the idea that these are testicles attached to her
Yeah,
apron.
I've not found anybody that really knows.
Yeah. Either way, it's sexualized completely,
Yeah.
which is what the celebration degenerated into. Their worship festival was an orgy, and men would become eunuchs and give themselves over in the service in the temple.
Which, I mean, so you think about this at the end of Ephesians, when Paul talks about putting on the full armor of God, clothing, because there's a spiritual warfare going on in the city like none other, and it's on full display. And it's really this idea of, are we going to follow Jesus and adhere to what he teaches, you know, as far as morals and like all that stuff, the way, they were actually referred to as the way whenever the uprising comes.
You think that came from John? Because he's the one that writes that in John 14. He's the way, the truth, and the life.
Well, and even whenever the uprising in Ephesus is caused by Paul and calling out the temple of Artemis and all that stuff, the silversmiths and all that stuff, it was against the way. Like that was the way they described that. And so, yeah, it's this idea, are we going to follow in the way of Jesus, or are you going to give yourself over to the world?
My favorite moment today was that reading of that story in the theater.
Yeah.
Just reading aloud Acts 19 and thinking about, you know, that place with 25,000 seats, full of people. It says most of them didn't even know why they were there, but they're in an uproar. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? They're rioting, so they're just joining in the riot. But and Paul wants to go and address the crowd. You got to love his spirit, man. It's like, and his advisor, the people that know him, and the city people are going, no, please don't.
Because they begged him not to.
Yeah. It would have ended worse, I think.
Yeah, the Congress would have said he was inciting a riot and impeached him.
Yep.
No, wait, that's another story. So
Podcast down.
he goes ahead, you know, the whole process, but he has, by casting out the whole story, it's crazy. That happened right there. We were able to see that. But Artemis was the central piece of that.
Yeah, you're talking about during a festival is when that would take place. But outside of the festival, on a daily basis, you're talking male and female prostitutes covering that temple. And people would go there to participate. And it's not much different than we are today, because we don't have to go to a temple, but it's so much more accessible. And
Yeah, and that same culture as to ours, the instruction of God for sexuality is it's a gift from God for a man and a woman, one man, one woman, committed to each other for a lifetime as husband and wife. And so if you're a Christian, that's what you've been taught in Ephesus.
yeah.
And yet everybody else is doing it.
Well, and two, even in that, is it's a picture of a covenant relationship between God and his people. And so that's why marriage is such an important institution that is rooted in Christianity, is in the fact that it's a picture for the world of what it looks like to live in a covenant relationship. And yet, you know, we mess around and jack it all up, you know?
So there's 14 temples here. And it was fine to worship at each and every one of them. 14 deities. And Christianity says one. One.
Big difference.
Big difference.
Yeah. I think it comes down to identity. You know, it's like, who are you going to follow? Is it one of these 14? Or is it the one? The
Yeah.
way?
But it was costly. That's an easy thing to say. It was costly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jesus isn't a way, he is the way.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that the sign at the missions temple said that the Christians had destroyed it.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a whole lot of the upper levels left. They had reestablished a few pieces of the tower and such, but the Christians, when the Roman Emperor, mid-300s, Constantine declared it the religion of Christianity, the religion of the Roman Empire, in 333. But at about 360 or so, pagan worship was outlawed. And when that happened, they destroyed this temple. And it's because, you know, John's just exiled, which is a pretty strong statement about John, by the way.
Yeah, he lived here for 30 years.
He lived here for 30 years. He's 80 plus years old, 85 years old maybe, maybe a little more. And the people here had such reverence for him. He lived with authenticity, and so they don't kill him, which is pretty shocking. They exile him, right? But man, a lot of people were killed by the instruction and order of Domitian. And so when they got a chance, no honor given to him anymore. That temple's coming down.
Yeah, and they had tried that multiple times over the course of several years. When Domitian was killed by one of his servants, they removed his name from the city. And so that's kind of their first act of rebellion. But then they realize, oh man, we still want to be in Rome's good graces, and so we better name this after somebody. And so they name it after his dad instead, to appease the Romans. So, you know, we talk about compromise to culture. Well, there's lots of different ways that works itself out. You've got them worshiping Domitian, and then they stop that, but they're still compromising in the fact that, well, this is going to help us live more comfortably and be in Rome's good graces, and so we're gonna allow this to slide, and we're still going to worship his dad instead. And so temptation, compromise can sneak in a lot of different ways and a lot of different forms.
Emperor worship was a way that Rome ruled. It's not just about the pride and arrogance of the Roman ruler, although there was a lot of that, especially with like Domitian and Nero. But it's a way that they gave a rallying cry to their empire, because they've got all these kingdoms, all these peoples, nations, you know, the whole known world at one point. And so they give this common religious rallying cry around the emperor. Well, when Constantine converts to Christianity, he steps back from that. He's not going to put himself in he had a vision of Christ in battle. They won the battle. He became a Christian, you know. And we're getting rained on.
Yeah.
Hasn't rained all day.
It's supposed to have rained all day, and here we are at the
It
end.
rained
and starting.
all around us.
Yeah, we've been blessed.
Yeah.
Anyway, Constantine says Christianity is the religion of the empire, and that becomes the rallying force again, keep the people together. Problem is you can't do that. Same thing that was the Ephesians were challenged on in this letter in Revelation is what happened to the Christians of the empire when it became the convenient thing, the comfortable thing, the politically beneficial thing to become a Christian. That's the beginnings of the crumbling of the church.
Yeah.
You know, we have the government and the church paired together, and we got troubles. So the message from Jesus is they need to repent, and they need to find their love for Him again. If they can do that, they're going to be all right.
Yep. Matthew 5.
But if you, well, yeah, how's that play out?
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness.
Hunger. You've got to have that love for Him. It's not just about doing stuff or not doing stuff. It's about Him.
Yep.
It's the heart. So before we get soaking wet here in Ephesus, and the camera, more importantly,
Quick.
gets wet, we're going to wrap it up. But thanks for joining us on the ReThink podcast.